Hello and welcome. My name is Gert from SEOleverage.com. This is episode 25 of our podcast. And today, my main goal is first, not get too technical when we talk to today's guest about how Google tries to actually understand the content of a page. It's a pleasure to welcome Dixon Jones, who is, I think, not only one of the most approachable SEO speakers out there, but also the person that definitely explains PageRank the best on YouTube. So whoever wants have some doubts on PageRank and how this really works, Google Dixon Jones PageRank YouTube, and you're definitely going to get a 25-minute good overview about how this actually works or is supposed to work. Dixon, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks a lot for having me, Gert. That's the PageRank video. Actually, if it's on dixonjones.com on the homepage. I'm so proud of that one.
Perfect. This one is really good. I use this for my team as well as training material once in a while, and I said, look, get an idea about internal linking, but start how this actually was supposed to work with Google's algorithm, and then you have a good idea how PageRank internal link choosing and stuff like that is just transferred across the page essentially. You're one of the long-standing SEO people out there. I would say you almost co-founded Majestic, or at least were there in the very early stages. The SEO industry definitely thinks you're the co-founder.
Yeah. I mean, I was there right near the start. But there's this guy called Alex who doesn't like to get out much, and basically it is his baby. But when he was still in his bedroom, I kind of caught wind of what he was doing and realized that I knew everything that all the people in the world that needed what he was building, and it was quite incredible because he was when he built that, Yahoo Site Explorer was a system. It was the only backlink system around at the time. Moz was just coming on stream with theirs. But when I realized that he wasn't using Yahoo's API like everybody else out there was, I realized that he'd got something really fantastic. So we ended up going into business together, and I spent the next 8, 9, nearly 10 years working with him really as a marketing director.
Amazing. Ahrefs, I made Majestic for some of the people that might be more on the Ahrefs side of things. There are two tools out there for link analysis. Majestic was the first one. Ahrefs came a little bit later. I think both tools, we use both of them in the agency for different purposes. But it is interesting for me, both tools, especially Majestic, is really focused on the backlink side of things. It's really good when it comes to the type of analysis where you say, okay, what are the topics those backlinks are in? And then I found it interesting that you're now with your current company, InLinks.net, rather on the on-page side of things. So you transition really from a link-based analysis to an on-page analysis. How did this happen?
Yeah, so I mean, when I pulled back from Majestic, I kind of took a little bit of a breather. 10 years is a long time, and then another guy came along. So just like with Alex at InLinks, Fred came along, who's based in France, and he said, "Look, I've got this idea for a product," and really it was. We still do with links, but internally we optimize links internally. So we use a JavaScript system, so we can map all the internal links, but we also are heavily focused on the on-page content now. And the reason that we're doing that now, so basically I'm playing number 2 to somebody else's number 1. Although this time I'm the major investor, so life has got quite good from that point of view. But my motto in life, as you know, is always go into business and make sure that the developer you go into business with owns more shares than you do, because then they don't leave, because otherwise businesses don't work. Startups don't seem to work online. You need a developer to be so heavily invested that you don't have to worry about that piece of the puzzle. So and then deal with the on-page part of it in a different way to all of the other tools that have come before, really, because Google has changed.
Absolutely. I think Google definitely has changed, and I think it's really interesting. As Google users, we very often think, okay, Google just gets it, right? Google scans a page and just gets it. Our clients as well, we educate them a lot in the initial stages and said, okay, it's still about not keywords necessarily anymore, but we still need to mention those topics to make sure this is a a good article, this is deep enough, has the context enough, etc. What would you say Google really understands from a text if you just put it to the web?
So we Google's got an API that people can use, and this I'm promised not to get too technical, but you put in a bunch of text, and it will come back and say these are the main entities that this page is about, and the definition of entity is kind of interesting. So to Google, and a topic, they in their documentation they use the phrase topics, and sometimes they're talking about entities and sometimes they're talking about just more generic topics and things, but they've changed the way that they understand content from trying to read a page and understand all of the words on the page and optimize the whole web based around web pages. They're now really trying to focus on concepts and ideas and topics. So for me, a topic is a Wikipedia article. For the non-exact people, you're not going to go a long way wrong if you can sit there and say, right, if it hasn't got a Wikipedia article, it's not really a thing. It's not really a product. It's not really it's not, if it's got a Wikipedia article, then you know that Google's going to understand what the heck it is, really. So they've got their own database. Google's got their own knowledge graph of topics and ideas and concepts, and they're storing all the world's information in that way instead of just trying to have all the web pages in the world. It turns out that then you've got an index. If you think in terms of databases or think in terms of a big Excel spreadsheet, instead of having an Excel spreadsheet with every single web page in the world, trillions of URLs in the world, and then all the things that they're about. If you have a Excel spreadsheet of all the ideas in the world, that turns out to be hundreds of billions, which sounds like a lot, but it's a lot less than trillions. So you've now got an Excel spreadsheet that's only hundreds of billions of lines long, and then all the pages on the internet that maybe have a reference about them. So you've got a different way of storing information, which for Google then scales much better. It also allows them to weed out rubbish, because they can sit there and say, right, the concept of, I don't know, President of the United States, or let's go for President of the European Union. Let's not go too American. Here's all the things that we know about the President of the European Union. And they don't all have to be web pages. They can be, things in their database that they know about, when they were born, when they joined, their career or whatever. It'll also have web pages as well, which connect and reference that kind of information. But it allows them to have a single point of truth for an idea, which is a double-edged sword in its own right. But it allows Google or any large search engine that's trying to organize the world's information to scale better. So it's not surprising that they're moving towards, or have moved towards, this approach. They're not killing the other approach of trying to read all the data and read all the pages, but this gives them much more scale. So it then becomes a case of, how do we as marketing people integrate with and influence topics and ideas, rather than how do we get seen for a particular keyword? Because Google is not just saying, here's all the web pages in the world that have got this keyword. It's saying, right, what web pages have we already analyzed that are about the underlying topic that this search phrase is looking for? So when Google does a search phrase, they're then they're then saying, right, what entities are involved in this search phrase? So they're not really looking up necessarily the exact keywords in your pages. They're looking up the underlying concepts, and I think it's a huge change for us as marketers to understand.
I think there are many good points here, I think, that are really worth exploring a little bit further. So Google scans an article, breaks it down into concepts, into ideas, into topics,
yes,
and then tries to match those topics with the topics they extract from a search query. So when you type in a search query, Google tries to also understand the query, which is a part I think many people don't realize. So you type in a search query, and Google, first of all, tries to understand what you're trying to achieve. They don't try to match your keywords with some other keywords, as they did many years ago, but they try to understand what you are trying to achieve based on the topics you mentioned, based on the idea that's behind your query. Then try to match this with topics that are in their index in certain database, certain structures, and things like that.
And it's something we try to emulate So we try. I remember, I do go back a long way, and I was running an agency for 10 years before I got involved with Majestic. So my SEO does go back to 1999, and I remember, when word clouds came out, I used to take take two pages and then compare the word clouds of them, and then they never kind of really matched up, but it was because different pages were using different words in different places and different concepts, and you couldn't, the bridge and bridges, were two different words, and so you had to go through lots of other processes to try and get these ideas to match up. And it's kind of the end point of that. There's no real difference between a bridge and a pontoon, or I'm sure there's other words for bridges. I can't think of one right now, but there's all these synonyms that are out there. And also, when you add the word tower to it, tower bridge is a very specific entity. It's not a tower and it's not a bridge. It is tower bridge, and a tower, Eiffel Tower, is not just any old tower. It's the Eiffel Tower. So I think the word cloud idea just didn't quite work, but the entity idea works much better for Google and for a large search engine. So what they can then do is they can say, right, the concept of Eiffel and tower together, bomb, that's a one entity. No point in thinking about the word tower anymore. An Eiffel Tower is an Eiffel Tower. There's only one of them, and it's there. But you can also then match up quite easily the relationships between ideas, between kings and queens, is one that's in a research paper that's quite well documented. So you can see that kings and queens are semantically related, or king and queen is a semantically close topic. And then you can see that in context. So if you go for horseshoe, I don't know if the Swiss have got the same kind of metaphor, but horseshoe could either be in one page of contents could be related to horses, and in another page of content could be related to good luck charms and fortune. So they can then use this map of topics and underlying context to sit there and say, right, horseshoe in this context, I need to bring back stuff that's related to good luck, and horseshoe in this context, I need to bring back farriers and horse shoes.
Absolutely. So it's funny. My SEO history goes back probably 20 years as well. I was doing a lot of this time. I was doing web development, but slowly then growing SEO.
You must have been 6 at the time.
I wish. I wish.
Yeah, younger than me.
I probably started in my 18, 20 years or something like this. And it was funny because I was really only focused on programming. I didn't want to do anything else. But I just found that the web pages I created for clients didn't rank. And so I had to figure out how this worked. Back then, every IT guy did everything. So from ads to SEO, obviously, and everything. But SEO then has been growing over time. But it is funny because what we did very early was handwritten notes. We weren't the smartest to use word clouds for this, but we did handwritten notes. So I just checked what is Google ranking, made handwritten notes, and said, look, they're ranking articles that talk about this, ranking articles that talk about that. And it was then funny that Google at some point then transitioned and said, look, we're only interested in deep articles. Was it a theme at some point where they say, okay, we need articles that really catch all those phrases. And this is also something we talk to in our framework-based consulting. We have this Erica framework where we walk people through different stages of SEO, different things they should be tackling on a regular basis. And we very often just really ask them, do some research, right? Without any tools away, just read the top 10 pages and make some notes. And you're going to realize there are certain themes that just come up. So if you then create an article that doesn't deal with the Eiffel Tower, when we talk about the most important towers on this planet, you're probably missing out.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think this that is the key. And it doesn't really then matter too much how Google's algorithms change if you are then writing content that is, as that covers all of the important points that the best content covers, and then hopefully one more as well. Then you've written a knowledge leadership piece for that particular situation. but wouldn't it be great if there was a piece of kit out there that could go and find those underlying themes and topics and ideas and save you what has to have been, hours of work each time just to create one article, just to try and find the underlying themes that are being mentioned. And it turns out a computer program is much better at understanding those themes and not missing out, particularly co-occurrences between 10 pages. That's kind of where we come in really with
would you mind explaining co-occurrences for our listeners?
Yeah, so co-occurrences. So if you've got the top 10 web pages that are in the search results in France for any given phrase, then well, let's stick with France, and so top 10 towers in the world, and you've got Tower Bridge and Eiffel Tower and the Tower of Babel and or whatever. So the thing is that if there's going to be lists of a thing coming back, yes, there's going to be some that mentioned Eiffel Tower. There's going to be some that mentioned the Tower Bridge. There's going to maybe one that says the Tower of Babel, or three that has. So basically, co-occurrences is how many times that concept is mentioned in the corpus of results, the seed set of results, the 10 pages that you're analyzing. I mean, you could analyze more pages, but the thing is, if you carry on going for too long, you start getting the rubbish as well. So you kind of want just the cream of the system. You don't want to go too deep, and you also try to avoid the looking at the navigational parts of a web page as well, because that will set the things off. So what you really want is the main body of the text, and what the writer was doing, not all the stuff that's around it. If you've got some automated bits and pieces going around a web page, that's just annoying noise for trying to understand what the writer was trying to get to. But when you break that down into its underlying topics, if all 10 of them are talking about the Eiffel Tower, you're pretty much not going to rank if you don't mention the Eiffel Tower, unless Google says, right, and I want something that does something completely different to all of the other ones in the results, which could happen, of course.
Happens as well. Happens as well. Co-occurrence definitely is also very powerful. We've seen when you start trying to associate a new brand with some established brands. So you just keep publishing content, getting content, make sure that Google connects the dots and says, yeah, this is probably rather similar as these other solutions. If you have a comparison and you come up with a new rank tracker, or you come up with a new text optimization tool, starting to mention this tool next to other more established brands, we feel we don't have hard data, but we feel this is really helpful for Google to connect the dots and just really associate this new brand they don't know yet, they don't have an entity for yet, slowly with similar tools in the same market.
It does seem to work. I mean, InLinks didn't exist 2 years ago, and but now it seems to be, Google understands what it is. It's got we've got our a little box of frequent pages and stuff like that, and it's got a pretty good idea of the system, and it's really because I think that we are creating knowledge articles that are not competing directly head on with our competitors. We've got trying to have a unique bit, but and being unique and not trying to compete head on probably helps, because it makes it easier for our competitors to reference us, rather than us, being head on, or people within those fields at least, accepting us as a player in that space, because our product is not at the moment competing head on with some of the big players. Who knows how that'll develop, but it's got us this far anyway. So I'm glad I made the investment in the first place. So
absolutely, it got at least to a stage where we are actively working on integrating InLinks into our application for our consulting clients. So whoever's going to use the application probably in a month or two is going to be able to get the text optimization, suggestions, analysis, and things like those. Whatever your API is going to do, probably within.
So the API. So it's great that you're going to put it in there. So the API actually does two things. It runs a natural language processing algorithm over the content, over a page of content, and extracts the underlying entities. But it also runs Google's natural language processing algorithm over the content and extracts those entities as well. So it's now got 2 lists of entities. And there should be an overlap, really. You know, if you had a perfect world, Google would say this is about these 4 things, and we'd say it's about these 4 things. But what usually happens is Google says it's about these 3 things, and we say it's about these 30 things. And that's because we have our job is to tell the user, that sort of the SEO or the customer, all of the topics that this page is talking about, and Google's job is to try and filter out the few that it thinks is the most important things, because they don't want to, you know, overload their systems with, you know, every topic under the planet. So there's always a big gap, and we run reports every week that compares the average change, average thing. And at the moment in the UK market, I think only about 15% of the entities that we see are seen by Google. So we have this concept called SEO score, which is all a bit in beta, but I think it's quite clever. So it's basically the number of entities that Google reports in their API divided by the number of entities that are actually on a page is what we call the SEO score, and so that then comes into the API as well. It's not always, you don't always want 100% high SEO score, because then you may be just trying to say that this page is about 50 things. What you really want to do is make sure that, you know, Google definitely understands the right entities for the content and reports those. And then you want this list of topics that you should be talking about. If you're looking at another person's page and a competitor's page, then being able to see all the topics that they're talking about. If you just use Google's API there, you don't have enough information on it, because they're only reporting, you know, a few of the topics.
Yeah, seems like they're holding back quite a bit on the information they actually would have on the page or could provide with the API.
Yeah, well, I think I found this with all the way through Google's world, and I don't blame them that they don't want to give us all of the data. So it's nice that they give us an API. But it's like the link data. Google kind of over the years took away the link data all the time, and that's why Yahoo had had Site Explorer, because it was the one thing that was undermining Google's system, really. But unless technologies go out and build their own, or that the industry can use, then you're always playing to Google's tune, and that's not always the best way to try and win. You kind of need this extra layer of information which somebody's got to go and build. Unfortunately, we need people like you to understand what the hell we're doing, so that you can then translate into usable products.
We at least try our best. What do you think? We're talking about entities now a lot. So entities, I like their explanation. Everything that comes up in Wikipedia is an entity. There are also things that don't come up in Wikipedia that are entities that Google has a numeric identifier for, at which point Google takes a word like SEO Leverage, our agency, and says, this is now entity number such and such.
Yeah. So for sure, there are entities that are not Wikipedia in Wikipedia. That's true. That Google understands are not in. So they have their own independent database, and things like Google My Business will then create an entity for people most of the time, and other data sources apart from Wikipedia can help to feed Google's knowledge graph, and getting to within your niche, getting to a particular level of authority should trigger Google creating an entity for your brand, for your name, for your thing, for your product, whatever it may be. And I think that's important, that you try and get your brand as an entity, if you and define your brand very, very well. But when it comes to content optimization, people, of course, are typing in generic. You know, people are thinking. Well, we still think of people as saying, you know, what is the best radio to buy? You know, or so people are. If they know your brand, then and you've got an entity, then your job is done. Your job is done. If somebody says Nike, if Nike doesn't come up, then somebody at Nike's SEO agency should get shot. But I assume that Nike.com will come up. But if somebody types in running shoes, then the game is open. And so Nike has two choices at that point. If they're a big brand, they can either try and associate their brand heavily with running shoes, but at that point they put some the distance between themselves and clothing or golf clubs or footballs or all the other things that they make and sell. So so it means that the concept of running shoes in itself is something that any brand or any business can try and influence, because the concept of running shoes is not specific to a brand, but that becomes I think more of the SEO's realm. How do I rank for running shoes, or how do I get customers that want running shoes to come to my product?
Right. Or the question: do I really need to rank for running shoes? Right.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, there is that, and I think that, and for a start, when somebody types in running shoes, are they talking about the concept of running shoes, or the concept of trainers, or are they talking about the concept of running, or are they talking about the concept of shoes? There's three different entities involved in that concept: trainers, running, and shoes, and it's only two words. So there is a whole myriad of questions that Google has to answer just when somebody types in a search, and what are they trying to get to, and what is the underlying thought process. And of course, Google has the advantage of knowing what your history was as well. So going back to the horseshoe example, if you just typed in horseshoes, Google would already know whether you have a tendency to go and have a look at fortune telling sites, or whether you have a look at farming websites, for example. So that history is something that we don't necessarily have as the end product, but it is a good reason why we should be looking at personas, really, in our marketing. Why we should be trying to understand what kind of person is coming to our business or should be buying from our business. It's not just about a phrase, it's about the kind of person behind that phrase. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Engines is another good word. Do they mean search engines, or do they mean combustion engines?
Yeah.
And that's one our system messes up all the time.
Yeah, there's definitely some manual approach still necessary. How does structured data markup help machines understand content? We have all our clients create structured data markup. We create it for them. They paste this into their website, or where we do the execution, we handle this part as well. We know InLinks helps creating this structured markup. How does this help a machine to really understand what this text is about?
It's turning it's in the words, it's turning unstructured data into structured or semi-structured data. So it's helping a machine to file any idea correctly, and put it in a place where it can be quickly retrieved accurately. So schemas such as organization schema, or for example, most businesses should be using organization schema to help any web page on the site saying this is owned by, or it's published by this company, or owned by this company, or is on the site that is the corporate entity for this organization. So that kind of schema can run all the way throughout your site, and as long as Google gets to a page that's got that schema on it, understands that it's associated with this particular company behind it, and so that's great. Where I think it becomes more difficult to do schema, and the bit that we concentrate on, is at the page level, trying to help Google associate the content on an individual page with the underlying entities that page is talking about. So knowing that Google only triggers 15% of the entities that we see on a page, that's okay as long as it's the right 15%. So the schema can very much help to tell Google what are the topics that this is mostly about, and other topics that we mention are maybe secondary, but they're still important to the page, but they're secondary to the main 2, 3, 1, 2, or 3 kind of topics. And by putting in schema that sits there and says, hey Google, this page is about a thing called the Eiffel Tower, and in case you don't understand what that is, Google, here's the Wikipedia page for the Eiffel Tower. what we're doing is easily giving Google, giving a search engine an easy way to map concepts to something that is already in their database, because we know that they've already got Wikipedia well and truly in their database. We could maybe link to an ID, a Google knowledge base ID to help them along that way, but they're a little bit that's a little bit more difficult. Seeing a Wikipedia page and matching it to a Wikipedia page is great. Matching your content to Wikipedia pages is great because humans can see it, we can understand it as humans, and the machine can understand it as well. So Google already knows everything about the Wikipedia page's Eiffel Tower's Wikipedia page. It already has that mapped into its own knowledge graph. It's already got its own ID number for it. The mapping is perfect. So we're taking unstructured ideas and giving a machine a helping hand to say, okay, you could read this page and try and work it out for yourself, but here's some hierarchy for that. Here's the and here's some pigeonholes. These are the main topics, the physically Wikipedia page topics that these pages are about. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it helps to structure the data. It literally helps to create machine learning ability, and cuts through the long process of a machine trying to interpret what humans do when they write things.
Perfect. So before I'm going to ask you for some practical advice for our listeners so they can create and optimize their content, I just want to quickly recap. We have a text. The text is broken down into topics, ideas, entities, as you've explained. Google doesn't understand everything. With structured data, we can help the machine understand concepts by mapping them. So yes. SEO Leverage is an SEO agency like this other one. Or this is a microphone as the microphone that Wikipedia describes on this microphone page. Or this is a coffee mug.
Absolutely.
This is coffee and mug.
And if you want to optimize, and if you want to optimize, then as you said at the start earlier on, you have to then do this not only for your own content, but you also need to check your competitors' content for the target that the target phrase that you're hoping to look at, and you need to break theirs down in to see that gap analysis between the topics that they're talking about and they're already the ones that are ranking, and what you're talking about, so you can see the gaps and fill those up. Yeah, absolutely perfect. So let's say someone wants to rank higher. They're ranking maybe on page 2. What should they be doing or focusing on in order to optimize their content to rank on page 1? Well, 3 things. Actually, one we haven't mentioned, but so I'll just so the 3 things are make sure that you're talking about all the topics that your competitors are talking about that are higher than you, particularly the top 10. And that sometimes that's just one topic. There's one bit of the puzzle that you haven't got in there and you haven't spotted it yet, and it seems subtle to you, and it may not be relevant because remember, Google might have got it wrong. So Google might have suddenly thought that if you don't mention I don't know, the Queen of England when you're talking about the concept of royalty, then it's that you don't have to have the Queen of England in the system, but everyone else is talking about, so Google's associated that as an important thing to have in there. So it may not be obvious what it is that's missing, but it may be 1 or 2 topics, and then suddenly it bumps you up there and you've got it. But the other 2 things, yes, the schema, but the other thing then is cannibalization of your content. One of the problems that we see quite a lot is that, particularly with smaller businesses, you're focused. You've made the great wise leap of saying, I'm going to focus on one thing. I'm not going to try and be Nike and do footballs and trainers, and I'm going to concentrate on, I don't know, tailor-made sports shirts or something like that. But then you find yourself writing 50 pages on different aspects of a sports shirt, and you've talked about the concept of a sports shirt a lot, but you've got no way of telling Google where the authority in your own website is for the concept of sports shirt. And Schema helps that, because you sit there and say, right, this is the page about sports shirt. You then shouldn't have another page that's saying this is only about sports shirt. You can have, say, this is a sports shirt in the context of rugby, or this is a sports shirt in the context of, but basically if you can have the authority around sports shirts in one place, then what you can do is then internally link all other mentions of the concept of sports shirts through to the page that is the authority on your website for the concept of sports shirts. So you can have many different topics that you're talking about on one page of content. You can talk about sports shirts, talk about running shoes, talk about tennis rackets, etc. You can have all of those things talked about in a big blog post, but you still want to link the tennis racket page mentioned to the tennis racket page, and the sports shirt page to the sports shirt authority. So you need to take those the important concepts and link them through to the page that is the authority on your site about that topic. Otherwise, there's going to be what we call cannibalization. And it's really basically splitting the authority for any particular topic around your website instead of concentrating it in to one particular page.
That's so important. I think one of the most important things that come out of our site audits we do on websites is to prune the website. Get rid of
quite often, yes,
duplications,
yes.
Add in at least canonicals or something like this. Obviously structured data then as well, and focus a lot of internal linking. We've seen sites come from page 7 to page 1 just with internal linking, just making sure Google understands which one of these 20, I think it was 26 different pages that talk about the same topic should actually be ranking. And it seems like when you give Google like a clear guideline so they don't have to worry whether this URL, that URL, etc., things seem to stabilize. So very often when clients say, look, I don't have a stable rating, my site comes up on number 3, number 6, page 2, page 3, page 1 again. And when we check, we see it's different URLs coming up, not the same URL, because Google, every time this ranking should come up, they pick one of the URLs, and based on the grade of optimization of that page, the ranking then shifts heavily. So cannibalization is definitely one of the most important topics.
Google have also made a big noise recently about passage indexing. So the idea, which I interpret as the idea that instead of indexing pages at a time, they're indexing a section of the text, which you can already see in different parts of the system, but they're treating a paragraph of text potentially as rather different to a page of text. So if you could have a section of the page that is authoritative on a particular subject, and the rest of the page Google doesn't care about. And I think that's kind of interesting. There was a lot of research way back in the noughties and before, actually, around breaking a page into chunks. So one of the things that Majestic does is it breaks a web page into 40 different sections. So every 5% of the page is a different section, and it works out where the links are, with their internal and external by section on the page, and uses that to create chunks, and that's turned out to be very, very effective in understanding the difference between an influential link and a not so influential link, so there's a lot of things around chunking, stroke passage indexing, stroke trying to ignore bits of the page that are contextually irrelevant to the main body content. All of these things are helpful for a search engine to pull out the important bits from a page and leave the rest.
For me, it was the passage indexing was really interesting for me, because it was like, for me, if Google said, look, we can't work with big texts, we can't understand big texts, but we can understand chunks. Not sure.
We're looking at that. So the search engine understanding score that we've kind of got in beta is really interesting, because one of the errors that we've got is that if you've written a long amount of text, then Google has a very low SEO score. So maybe they give up after a number of words, but basically if you carry on writing, you're going to talk about more and more topics. After half dozen topics, Google, after 20 topics, Google doesn't really want to complicate its own world. So writing more and more doesn't help Google get better. It muddies the issue unless it's extremely focused, and it just in which place it's repeating the same topics again and again, which also can be a little laborious for a machine to understand. So I'm not surprised. I think it may be that long form content is going to be less important in its day in the future than it currently seems to be. But who knows? Now I'm speculating.
We'll see what happens. It's definitely going to be interesting. We raised this in a discussion before we recorded last time. Also the artificial intelligence, how this is going to have an impact on what Google does actually with content, how they recognize, do they recognize, and they're not going to recognize if this is automated, if this is automatically bad because it's automated. It's because essentially we're describing a rather mechanical process, right? We're describing a process where I analyze. I have a tool like InLinks, for example, with machine learning in place that even does the job for me. I don't have to do my handwritten notes anymore. This does the job for me and does it much better. We're describing a mechanical process. Whatever is a mechanical process, the sense of automation automatically goes with it. Whereas, okay, this is now mechanical, and this is like the intermediate step between my handwritten notes and the machine just creating the text for me based on the analysis. So I think there are some tendencies that are really going to be interesting, how this is going to evolve.
I'm really worried about how that's going to pan out. I think being able to find out what you're supposed to be talking about is one thing. Then being able to press the button and it generates readable text as a result of that is now possible. And there's GPT-3 is an API that's out there that can do that. And I would imagine that you map our kind of output onto GPT-3's input, and you end up with some pretty impressive text that's hard for Google to ignore, and yet it's just machine generated text. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I don't know whether we're going to integrate it anyway because our customers demand it, or whether we're going to fight it and then let our competitors do it first. But it can't be good that all the world's information is then getting created and generated by a machine. Totally, it can't be good for society, and I don't quite know how that's going to pan out. But I guess that's going to be Google's a big problem in a few years, in a year.
I think they've been worried. I think they've been worried about this evolution for at least 10 years. Really, really worried, because a lot of their algorithm updates, a lot of what they have put out there, etc. If you see it from a point of view that AI is coming, and at the press of a button, I'm going to be able to create 50 websites with original content created by a machine that's going to compete with other 500, with a network of 500 maybe. And this is also so close to us. GPT-3 creates entire websites. You tell, look, I need a website with a logo on the left and columns on the right, and this content and these menu items, etc. This just creates it for you. We're constantly playing with AI. I just had my writers do another AI test round on a couple of AI text tools as well, because I do believe with all the research that's there, all the tools that are there, like yours, we are not starting with a blank document anymore, right? We already have some information. We create content briefs based on InLinks for our clients. There are other tools out there that give guidance on what we should be writing about. So we already have a lot of information in place. So having at least a first draft written by an AI, I think is something that might be coming. I don't think it's good either, but it's just an evolution we have been seeing in the last years. We see ad copy being used, AI generated ad copy. It's short text, so it's easier, and has a very clear tone, etc. So the easier it gets, the narrower it gets, the easier it is probably to use AI. Right now, the feedback from my writing team, we have 5 writers here, and they said, look, if I have to edit everything that the AI gives us, I can also write it on my own. It's not there yet. But what happens in a couple of years, right? What happens in...
I think also, if you've got genuine content writers, they don't want to just be editing. There's a difference between an editor and a content writer. And if we turn the content writers into editors, then we'll lose our content writers. So we got to be careful about that one as well.
Absolutely, yeah. No, interesting discussion. I want to come to an end. We're already beyond the schedule. Thank you so much, Dixon, for all the value you've put up there, all the explanations you've been giving. It's definitely interesting. Everybody who wants to know more can probably get in touch with you on dixonjones.com.
Yeah, well, or play with InLinks.net if you want to. There's a free version of that as well, or use your API.
Absolutely. API integration is coming, so definitely the content briefs, etc. we used to put together based on InLinks are going to be available within our application. Thank you so much for coming. Fantastic. And have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Gert. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.